thank you for coming to Heapcon. This is, as you all know, outer space hall, so you know for future. And here today we're going to talk about Jakarta EE, as you probably saw. And who better to tell us about Jakarta EE and cloud native stuff with better than Tanya, who actually works there, and she has quite some experience with it. So I'll leave the floor to you, Tanya.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me okay? Is it too loud? It comes to me as a too loud, but that's fine. So as this, I understand, is English-speaking conference, I will continue in English. As announced, I work for Eclipse Foundation, and I'm particularly working on Jakarta E project. So today, I will be talking a little bit, and let me just figure out how to go from slide to slide here. Okay, it seems that I can only do this. Nope. Okay, let me restart it. Maybe now. Nope. Okay. Technical difficulties. In the meanwhile, so yes, I work for Eclipse Foundation. I want to talk about what Eclipse Foundation does, a little bit about open source software. I want to list some of the cloud Java-related projects that are hosted at Eclipse Foundation. And then I want to move into Jakarta EE. So, okay, I think we're good to go. So going through the agenda again, projects, the big move, you will see what is the big move all about, Jakarta EE, what are the plans for the future of Jakarta EE, and then inviting everyone to be part of the open source community. So about the Eclipse Foundation. So it is a non-profit organization. It is a foundation that deals with open source software and projects related to open source software. And it does provide, let's say, 4 different type of services to anyone who is participating in open source. Welcome, welcome. So one thing that open source, and I believe this is case for majority of open source foundations, we do provide the infrastructure, and what that means really is the code repository, bug database, IP database, websites, wikis, so all the infrastructure really to support the open source projects. We also ensure that there is a process in government. So process in terms of any development needs to kind of guidance in terms of what is the expectation when you're developing software. So Eclipse Foundation is actually dealing with or using Eclipse development process for developing any coding projects. We will see a little bit later again that we are going to use for Jakarta, that is a specification development, deals with specification development. We're using something that we call and refer to as a Jakarta E specification process. In terms of the governance, just quickly, there are rules of engagement. So what we're trying to do, all the parties that are involved in open source software, that they have a level playing field, and that there are established rules in how projects are being governed. We also have a staff that is dealing with the community development, so business development people who are whose focus is growing the community, marketing, professional marketing team, organizing the different events for, promotion of different projects. And then team that is also dedicated to IP and management. And that is the whole licensing and intellectual property cleanliness of the projects. So extremely important. If anyone was involved in the open source software, they know to what degree that part is important. So if anyone heard of Eclipse Foundation, in my experience, most of the association with Eclipse Foundation is Eclipse IDE. Has anyone used Eclipse IDE before? Yeah, so that is just one of the projects at Eclipse Foundation. So you can see here we have over or close to 370 open source projects, a little bit less than 300 members, not to mention the number of committers, lines of code. It's a small company in terms of the staff, so it's about 30 plus people. And we'll talk about the different organizations, how the projects are being organized and governed. But at this point, I'll just mention we're dealing with a little bit more than 10 working groups, which is the unit that organizes a project. So what are the focus areas? So I'm here to talk about Jakarta EE and Cloud Native Java, but there are different pillars, which is IoT and Edge, and I know there are people in Belgrade who are involved in that part as well. There is automotive industry and with the autonomous driving and related fields, that is certainly a field that is it's in expansion, and it is very interesting to get involved in that as well, particularly big in Europe and Germany. And then the last pillar here is development tools, one of them being Eclipse IDE and different variations on Eclipse IDE. So how does everything work? So we call ourselves that we are open source software company that is open for innovation at industrial scale. So what exactly does that mean? So with our governance processes, as this slide is showing, with the governance processes, we enable different companies and individuals to collaborate together on the projects, develop the technology, and then afterwards they can build competitive products and be, fearless competitors among each other. But what the beauty is that collective development of the technology. You will see in a bit when we start focusing on Jakarta EE that is particularly important in that field. Has anyone heard of Java EE before? Okay, so Jakarta EE is continuation of Java EE, and we know to what degree that technology is important and embedded in many enterprise systems. So moving on, I'll just list some of the projects, other cloud native projects at Eclipse Foundation. So obviously Jakarta EE as the collection of specifications, but also Eclipse Glassfish, now called Eclipse Glassfish, previously called just Glassfish, is also one of the projects. Microprofile, we'll touch on it a little bit in a minute, which is basically an answer to the new microservices demand in the cloud native or cloud Java technology, right? Eclipse Che, which is the IDE that is geared towards the cloud. Jetty, I think most of the people are already familiar with as a web server, Open J9 as JVM. Eclipse Gemo, you will see a slide on that, and I'm happy to say that Vertex seems to be also popular here, and some people were even contributors to that project as well. So microprofile, yesterday on the unconference event, we touched on it just a little bit. It's an answer, as you may know, for Java EE for years, it wasn't really addressing some of the needs in terms of the microservices development or microservices demands. So microprofile is a project that was initiated by very well-known companies who have their investments in Java. And it started about 3 years ago, but it's really, in the last 2 years, it's really taking off quite well in terms of the adoption as well as the compatible implementations that are implementing these specifications. As I was saying, it is a set of specifications geared towards the Java developers. It fits really well within the developers who are familiar with Java EE, and I was happy to hear yesterday that some of you are already familiar with it. So what are the set of specifications for micro profile? So here is the slide. This is going to be released in version 3.1, and the release date is October 8th. Here is the set of implementations and companies that are involved in defining the specifications. So I'm sure some of the names are very familiar to most of you. And similar group of companies is also involved in Java EE, or rather, sorry, Jakarta EE. So Eclipse J is really the IDE that doesn't need any installation. So it is cloud-based. It is geared to work with different cloud-related technologies. Kubernetes listed here, right? So it is very popular. It's gaining in popularity as the IDE that is addressing the needs of the cloud Java developers. Eclipse OpenJ9, as I mentioned earlier, the JVM that actually is geared towards, again, the needs of cloud with the smaller footprint, enables rapid start time, thinking about the performance, all the keywords that are necessary for the cloud native. It is, we also mentioned yesterday, Graal VM, in a way trying to address the similar needs. Eclipse JMO, so it is the project that is trying to address different needs, or it is trying to figure out how to do not only fast, as it's saying here, function as a service, but also pass on multiple clouds. So the project is really at the beginning of its, it was recently actually contributed to open source. It is at the beginning in terms of the adoption. So it is a great time to get involved and see how you can contribute and be part of this. Okay, so I will not spend much time on any other projects because I want to focus primarily on Jakarta EE. So what is the big move? So Java EE as the technology, as the set of frameworks 2 years ago, Oracle has announced that they're planning to contribute this to Eclipse Foundation, to actually open source, and more specifically to Eclipse Foundation. Why Eclipse Foundation? It's one of the foundations that has a long involvement with Java as a language, so that seemed like a natural fit. So at that point, we also were looking into what does community, open source community, think about the name, right? Especially because Java is the trademark of Oracle. And most of the answers were, or suggestions were geared towards Jakarta. As some of you may know, Jakarta and Java have a long-standing history because the whole Java originated in Jakarta at some point as a name, and it seems that community liked that connection and wanted to continue with the name Jakarta EE. So basically, it's continuation of Java EE. So why Java EE? As some of you already indicated, the amount of Java developers in the world is still the number one. So it seems that that is the dominant language, programming language still. There is tons of Java EE applications out there that were kind of hesitant or observing what is going on with the cloud technology. And as Java EE was lacking in advancement in the last few years, it is a good time to for Eclipse Foundation and the whole community to jump on, make sure that not only Java as a language, which is Java SE, and Oracle is still dealing with that, developing the language base itself, but for us to develop the set of specifications as well. So why just we probably are guessing, but why are organizations still interested in Java EE? Some of the surveys that were run suggest that, as it's stated here, stability, the fact it's standards and specifications, and availability of the developers. I would also add probably compatibility is one of the reasons why Java EE is so popular. So having said all of that, now that we have all the Java EE specifications contributed to open source software and into Eclipse Foundation, we organized a Jakarta EE working group, which is the group that actually, as it's stated here, approves specifications, manages and drives the Jakarta EE brand, establishes the technical direction and roadmap, ensures the compatibility with open source technology compatibility kits. It grows community and so on. So that in a way is a governing body behind the Jakarta EE. So who is in the working group? So we have, at this point, 6 strategic members and 11 participating members. And those are the big corporations who have interest in further developing technology. And then, as I mentioned earlier, based on the specifications, they're developing their own products, compatible products that are competitors on the market. Why is that important? Well, it's important that it's a level playing field, that there is no monopoly, and there is vendor neutrality in the technology. Once the companies start building their own compatible products, they can build it based on the specifications and figure out whether they want to differentiate themselves with some additional features. But the core technology is exactly the same. And they're working together to develop that technology. What also is important to say that previously when it was with Oracle, it was dominated by what Oracle needs are. So the direction, there is a big distinction between vendor neutrality and what we had before with when it was resided at Oracle. So at Eclipse Foundation, just quickly, I mentioned a little bit less than 380 projects. Just Jakarta EE is equivalent to about 39 projects at this point. And you can see all the other stats there. So while at Oracle, you are probably all familiar with the JCP. So that is the process that was used to develop different JSRs and evolve Java language completely, but as well as Java EE. Now, for Eclipse, at Eclipse Foundation, what we did, we created open specification process, and we call it Jakarta E specification process. It is based on the Eclipse development process, but it's tailored further to the specifications. So what are the key differences between what JCP had and what Jakarta E specification process has? I listed my top 5, if you will, here, and I'll just quickly explain what exactly do I mean by this. So JCP was really big on developing the specification first, so meaning the specification document and the instructions on how to do the implementation. So what Jakarta is specification process does is try to encourage code first. So try something out in code, figure out whether that idea works, figure out whether that idea is accepted by the community and is something that is really needed. And after that, not once you're completely finished with your coding, but when you see that this idea makes sense, then start developing the specification. JCP is really geared towards having a spec lead who has the ultimate authority in terms of gearing up or directing the development of the specification. What Jakarta E process does is insist on collaborative approach. So even though we do have project leads, there is no need to, there is no special role for a specification lead except to ensure that the team is continuously engaged and we don't have the project that is kind of dying off just because of the lack of communication or rather regular communication. So documents and TCKs are completely open source. That is, some would say, the major difference from before. So now when you're testing your products for purpose of certification, you can see exactly how that code looks like. You can object to some of the tests. You can contribute some of the tests and it's definitely more open. Previously, TCKs were completely closed off, and when people were submitting their products for certification, they were just informed on passed or failed. This time around, it is completely open and transparent. Oops, sorry. Um, in JCP, we also had one implementation that was called reference implementation, and that was typically Glassfish, was used as a reference implementation of any new version of Java EE. This time around, we have compatible implementations. And the requirement is to have one or more compatible implementations, so at least one, that will prove validity of the specification. The certification process itself has changed now. The requirement is for each user to do self-certification with the obligation to provide their certification results publicly. So I already mentioned, so those are the principles that are now put in place. It is the transparency, so everyone has insight into understanding how the process works, how the code looks like, how the certification works. And then that opens to openness. So it is open to a wide community to review, to participate, comment, contribute in various ways. That also means that openness, that it's a shared burden. So it is a responsibility of the whole community to make sure that there is a progress in developing the specifications. And also what this means, and it's extremely valid point, I would say, is vendor neutrality. So even though we have companies who are bigger or smaller, leveled field is extremely important, and everyone has a voice in terms of direction of the technology. So this is just a slide that will is briefly showing how the specification process looks like now. And if you kind of eliminate or put the blind eye into those dotted boxes, which are reviews that are put in place, you can see that it's not drastically different from any other development process. So Jakarta EE, finally talking about Jakarta EE, what is it all about? So that is on September 10th, we released the very first version of Jakarta EE that is exactly equivalent to Java EE. So that means the intention there is to, first of all the code is now residing at Eclipse Foundation. We have open source TCKs. Everyone can run those and see how the code looks like. We focused on the two major specifications, which is full platform and the web platform. And we are web profile rather. And we are actually ensuring that there is a continuation. Everyone who was on Java EE can seamlessly go into Jakarta EE, and that is the base layer for advancing and further development of Java EE. So it is fully compatible with Java EE. I will not focus too much on JAVAX namespace, but for this version, we are using, there is no difference in terms of the namespace. If you're familiar, there is a little bit of the, again, restrictions from Oracle in terms of the Java trademark. So at some point we will deal with the change of the namespace. But for this version, we did not have to do that, just to enable all the users to seamlessly transition to Jakarta EE version. So just a listing exactly what it is. So it is the full compatibility with Java EE, open specifications, open source TCK, compatible implementation. On the day of the release, we already had 3 compatible implementations released that very day. The same platform integration requirements as Java EE, and fully transparent branding process as well. Everything published on the website as well. So what is the website? It's Jakarta EE. I'm just showing here a couple of slides, couple of screenshots rather, just to indicate that, and probably you cannot even see it there, but Jakarta EE, and off of that Jakarta EE release, and then Jakarta EE specifications where you can find the information. Let me just, so those are our 3 compatible implementations. I want to mention Jakarta One live stream. We did it also on the release date, September 10th. There is 18 hours of content. Anyone who is interested, it is available right now for replay. And if you go to jakarta1.org, all the sessions, keynotes, live coding, all of it is available there. So this is the website, and please go and visit. So what is next for Jakarta EE? So we have kind of a rough roadmap here. We started with Glassfish 5.0, and you know, that was Java EE 8. Then we had Glassfish, Eclipse Glassfish, so the project that was contributed to Eclipse. We wanted that to be certified with the Java EE 8, making sure nothing is broken. Then we have now Eclipse Glassfish 5.1 certified on Jakarta EE 8. And we're looking forward and already making plans for Jakarta EE. We are going to deal at that point with the new namespace. As I said, as I mentioned, Java X namespace is something that we need to deal with. We are hoping that Java SE 11 will be supported. We are going to invite community to, and actually all of these discussions have started, and you can find it off of the website. What exactly, if anything, needs to be deprecated and not needed to be evolved going forward, and then what else can be done. We already have proposal for new specifications. One of them is Jakarta NoSQL, and then Jakarta Batch as well. And we have a full list that we received from the community as well on what do they want to see going forward in Jakarta 9 or future releases. So at this point, I would just want to invite you to figure out how you can get involved in open source. So just to stress out, not all the work is coding work, right? So open source is community of not just companies, but individuals who either believe in technology or want to learn something on technology. Everyone needs to figure out what is their interest in being the part of open source community. So marketing and promotional work, please connect on social media. If you want to be active, write blogs, present and share the knowledge in the community. So this is not only for Jakarta EE, but any open source project. Of course, my invite to you is focusing on Jakarta EE, but you know, the principle is the same. So technical work as well, coding, start looking into different projects and what exactly is your need for Jakarta EE and how to involve that. Technical work, collateral work, so explaining the technology and building materials to explain the technology is something that is also always needed. I listed here a couple of pointers how to really connect with us. and also how to start tuning in what's going on with Jakarta E. So if you have an event or want to create event that is Jakarta E related, please let us know about it. We have monthly or bi-monthly, depending on on a month and the season. We have Jakarta Tech Talks. Please join in. We have Jakarta blogs, as I mentioned already, and you can jump on writing about those as well. In terms of being involved as a contributor or a committer, I purposely put here a couple of slides that are actually showing what is needed from you in terms of the paperwork to ensure the IP is taken care of. So you can get familiar with that. Some additional links just to make them handy to you in terms of the getting familiar with the working group, some of the projects and where you can find the projects and what is the top level project for Jakarta E. GitHub links where you can find the information and discussions on the platform, Jakarta E platform. I want to invite you to consider coming to Eclipse Foundation Conference. That is 21st, I believe, of October. Please have a look, and if you have a chance, join in. There is also a community day. So community day, what does that mean? So community is organizing events for the community, right? So if you are interested to take part, check that out. And that's everything I have. So I hope we have a few minutes for questions or discussion or concerns or anything else. Jokes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything? Feedback?
Thank you, Tanya.
Yes. Yes, please. Okay. Yes. ID? Why did we leave ID? No, we didn't. Oh, you mean like in the, why is not like for years it was top one and now you feel it's not as... So, well, depends who you talk to. There are tons of people who think that it's extremely important and it's being used, but I do understand what the point is, that you believe, your observation is that it's not as dominant as it used to be, right? In the field. So here is my answer. Regardless of what the issue is, in terms of what is not there, present there in IDE right now, it is actually like, I would encourage you to log an issue in the GitHub and ask, why don't we have this, right? So keep in mind, this is not Eclipse Foundation that is developing, it's the community out there, right? So if you see something is missing, or anyone is seeing something is missing, the right thing to handle that is log an issue, and especially for ID that has such a community around it, you know, there might be more than you who is observing the same problem, and therefore the investment will put in place to address the issue. Does that help? Okay, no problem. Yep.
Sorry, we're running a bit late on time. I'm sorry. I will invite you to ask Tanya after.
Yeah.
It's okay, you'll say after, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'll be here so we can chat.
I'm really sorry because we're a bit late, so we're going to be a bit late for the next session, about 5 minutes. I want to thank Tanya for presenting us with Java EE and introducing us. Great talk. So if someone wants to join, you left
Yeah,
the links.
absolutely. As soon as I unhook myself, I'll be available for a chat.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry again.
Hey.
Thank you. Mm. Yeah. What? No, it's okay.
Hello, hello everyone. Hi everyone, welcome to Outer Space Hall. And now we have our speaker, Antonio. If you ever wondered how it is to talk on a conference, how to get to a conference, or you're having fears about it, Antonio will explain us how to overcome them and how to successfully land a talk on a conference. So give a warm welcome for Antonio.
Cool. Thank you for being here. I don't know whether you are going to still think at the end that this is going to be a successful talk or not. That is one of my fears all the time. And it's more than 3 years already. I'm always scared on every talk, whether it's going to be a good one, bad one, or whether I'm going to be alive after the talk. So my acceptance criteria, when I'm doing the talk, I only have one line. Are you alive after the talk? Yes. So that's a success for me. And sometimes, bonus, one person in the audience think that it was useful, and then could be the fulfillment of my target here, to get at least one saying, oh, it was a good talk. The agenda is going to be, at the beginning, all the fears that I have about public speaking and how I manage to overcome sometimes some of them. Hopefully it will help some of you. Then another fear that I had is I didn't know how to apply to speak at conferences, how to create the proper information to submit to conference organizers. So the second part of the talk, it could be my thinking when I'm sending talks to conferences. And at the very end, imagine that you get accepted at the conference and you're going to give a talk. Yay! So some tips that no one told me before, and I found really, really useful sometimes. Let's start with some of my fears. I'm going to talk only about 5 of them because we only have 45 minutes. And I want to talk about other things as well. Each time that I go to a conference, I always think that people there are the most expert on their domains. So for me, an expert is someone who can answer any question in less than 10 seconds, no matter the complicated question it is. I never consider myself that kind of person, because if you ask me a complicated question, probably I'm going to freak out and I say, yeah, can you discuss with me later, maybe? And maybe I will get a taxi before you get me. The thing is, I've been on a lot of conferences and a lot of talks that are really, really interesting for me is when someone is explaining failures or explaining how it was a journey discovering a new technology or a new methodology, because it's really useful for a lot of people to understand how to start. So you don't need to be an expert. Normally, I don't use a lot of quotes on talks. I only have one on this one. And for me, that's the value of a talk with an expert, is to give us hope, not to tell us exactly how to do things. Because if someone is telling you exactly how to do things, you are not thinking. You are not trying to get better. And one of the motivations for me about coming to conferences is becoming a better version of myself every day, the continuous improvement, but for myself. And it's a motivation to try to go and to share my failures, share my experience when I'm learning a new stuff, or when one of my teams are struggling to find their pace or doing actually stuff. Right now, I'm more a Scrum Master and Agile coach. I'm trying to get people to be better. So that could be a little bit weird if I'm trying to get others to be better if I don't try myself, right? I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm the youngest of 7 siblings, so the little one that you see all your brothers and sisters really big, so Probably I was already conditioned to be afraid because everybody else was bigger than me. This, that is only, I don't know, roughly 25 people or less, is more scary, actually, than when you have 400 people, at least for me. And the reason is because I can see the faces of all of you. And that feeling of people staring at you, people, and even people sleeping, it happened, hopefully not today. That is really, really a nightmare for me. But I realized that I managed to do, on my professional career, a lot of one-to-ones with managers discussing salary raise. That's really a scary thing. And I was good on that. When you go to a new client and you need to present what you intended to do, that's scary because you have 4 people looking at you. My tip about this is, have you ever had the feeling that the speaker on a talk is looking at you all the talk and no one else? Any of you? Cool. I don't know if other speakers. In my case, if you think that I'm looking at you all the time, probably I am. And I'm going to tell you why. As I'm so scared of the people looking at me, I'm trying to find at the beginning someone that is projecting coolness or happiness or things like that. And it's like an anchor for me. So when I'm a little bit scared, I look at that person, okay, it's still okay. And that works for me. That works because I don't see the rest. When you have 400 people with the light, it's even easier because you don't see them. So it's like when you are doing a rehearsal with an empty room, the room is empty because you don't see them. If you manage to have that mindset, it's easier. You notice already, my English is not perfect. I'm from Spain, so really, really bad start. English is not my first language. It's not even my second one. I have lived 9 years in France. Any French here? No. Cool. Have you ever heard someone from France speaking English before? Cool. So I'm not copying all the issues, but sometimes my tone of the voice is a mix of Spanish with French, which is really confusing for the people in UK, that now I live in UK. And when I moved there, I wasn't able to understand anybody. I was able to understand everybody in the films from America, not UK. So I had to have some lessons softening my accent. Yeah, that's the soft version of my accent. It was worse. But about the English, I realized one thing. On most of the conferences, if you check all the speakers here, how many people are actually English speakers with it's the first language? 20% maximum? So it's not a problem to give talks if your English is not perfect. And sometimes, at least for me, I'm even more enjoying when someone is making an effort to give a talk on a different language. Don't be afraid of that. We are 80% here. And if you're understanding me today, probably I would be able to understand you the next day that you're here. Okay? And it's, again, continuous improvement for yourself. I did lessons to try to get my accent softer a little bit. And I can try to motivate you to try to get your accent soft. It's something to improve, right? I speak really fast. I'm from Spain. That's the slowest version of myself. So if it's really fast today, raise both hands. Then I know that I need to cool down and speak slower. If you are really bored and I'm speaking really fast, don't do anything, and in 20 minutes we're done. Okay? The thing is, when you speak fast, it's really complicated to realize that people don't understand you. You have a good thing. When people speak fast to you, you understand them really well because you are able to think at the same space. So one tip that I got from my softening accent lessons. And now, especially now that I have a 2-year-old daughter, imagine when you are trying to give a speech that you have the food for the baby, a lot of spoons, take 1 spoon, information. Another spoon, information. If you try to do that to a baby, it's not going to work, right? You are going to have all the food on you. Even if you do 1 by 1, you can have the food on you. So that could be my tip. It was really amazing, even though you realize that I'm forgetting the spoons all the time. And then one of my fears is I'm asthmatic. Any asthmatic here? Cool. I'm really happy for you. Being asthmatic, I don't know if you have anybody in the family asthmatic. Imagine that you have a suitcase and you have to go 5 floors, stairs, with a big suitcase. The feeling that you are when you feel when you arrive finally, that's my normal breathing. So if I have to do the 5 floors, it's even worse. But that's my normal breathing. And if I watch myself on a video, on a talk, everybody else maybe is listening to my words. I can hear me breathing, only my breathing all the time. And I'm really, really worried that you can hear only the breathing. I have some kind of revelation on one conference. Does anybody know her? Probably not, so it's okay to say no. She's Sharon Steed. I was in a conference 2 years ago in Tallinn, 400 developers, opening keynote about empathy. She is a heavy stutterer. She is stuttering all the time, giving an opening keynote for her 400 developers. I was amazed. And I'm worried because maybe they're going to hear my breathing, and she's able to give an opening keynote being a stutterer. It was one thing that she was saying about empathy and being empathetic, and trying to share your limitations with others, not to say, oh, poor one. No, it's try to explain to them what it feels for you, your day-to-day. If you manage to realize, with the example of going with a suitcase, how is my day-to-day breathing, maybe you realize why I'm worried about my breathing all the time on the talk. It works for everything, not only for being asthmatic. It works for the accent. I'm explaining to you and trying to get you to imagine how it is to have an accent like that. It's the same with asthmatic. So I'm always with an inhaler all the time. So if there is a problem, my black bag is over there, the inhaler is there. Not the pink one, the blue one. Okay? The pink one is a different one. You may hear my breathing. And sometimes I might need to shut up for 5 seconds. The thing is, I'm from Spain. We joke about ourselves all the time. And I have a colleague, early years of my career, that once I was a project manager. Okay, cool. No tomatoes. And on one day that I was having a really bad day, he told me, you know, when you're breathing like that, and knowing that now you're the project manager, you always remind me of someone. Normally, each time that I have given this talk, from this time till the end, my accent is no longer an issue for you. You don't hear my breathing, and you understand how I'm speaking, even if it's fast. If it's not the case, let me know at the end. If you understand it, and it's like magic, and it's working again, please let me know. Those are my fears. You can have others. I have more, but one of my fears I was a former developer, and I always wanted to have all the information up hand. I decided, okay, let's go for conference speaking. How do I get to a conference? I didn't know what to do, how to contact people, how to send things. It was really complicated. I managed to get help from other speakers, but you need to submit title and descriptions so to conferences. And at the beginning, you might think, OK, I have a greatest idea. I'm going to submit it. They're going to accept it because it's great. They are probably not. That's real data from this year. Cosmos in Madrid, 70 slots, 857 submissions. DevConf, Krakow, 32 slots, 351 submissions, and so on. That means that only 10% or less of the submissions are going to be accepted. So when you decide to start submitting, you need to be ready to not speak at the conference and to get rejected a lot of time. More data from previous year. They have 1,000 submissions. And they even publish on the Vox Belgium the type and everything. I suspect that this year, after that, probably there are more people submitting Ignite talks, because last year there were only 8 submissions and 7 got in. So I need to get in touch with organizers. What do you submit? Well, title and description. Sometimes you need to submit more things. And that's the key thing of a talk. When I created my first talk, I created the whole talk, all the slides. I was doing rehearsal and everything. And I didn't dedicate enough time to the abstract. That talk was rejected all the time. That, you need to convince the program committee that with the title and with your description, someone is going to buy a ticket for the conference, and someone is going to go to that room to hear your talk. So that's your selling point. I'm not an expert on marketing, but that's your minimal marketable product. It's the minimum thing that you need to do to market your product. Your product is your talk. The submissions, depending on the conference, there are going to be some blind process that they remove name and they only see title and description. However, that's not always the case. In some cases, they request for a link to a previous talk. So if they can see you, even if your name is not there, it's not that anonymous, right? And depending on the title and the description, program committees, half of them probably are speakers on conferences. So they know a lot of speakers, and they know if someone submits 7 deadly sins of microservices, there is a big chance that that's Daniel Bryan from UK that has been spoken, I don't know, 20 or 30 times that talk. So it's not anonymous because they know that. You need to choose your subject, of course. Keep it relevant to the conference, or the soft skill or generic things like this one to submit it. If you submit something about blockchain to a JavaScript conference and things like that, you are with less chances to get. If you are submitting something about how cool is JavaScript on a project management conference, if you get there, tell me how, and I will try to apply the same. Title and description. One of my talks was project management and DevOps. I never, ever gave that talk. It was never accepted. I have one talk. It's project management from Stone Age to DevOps. In essence, it's the same talk. And it got accepted 8 times in the same year because of the title. When you're attending a conference, if you see a generic title or something that is more different, you are more leaning toward the different one because the others you can find on YouTube, right? So you need to sell yourself. It's a long process. The most complicated is the first talk at the conference, because other conferences, can you explain to us your previous experience at conferences? So on those, probably you're not going to be accepted. There are some conferences that they want to have more new speakers. So they do half of the speakers without any experience and the other half with experience. My process now to create talks. I change a little bit. I no longer do the whole talk. I'm going to explain my process now. Well, first of all, you need to define why you want to speak at a conference. There are different reasons. If you have someone with a job title, advocate, evangelist, things like that, their job is actually speak at conferences. So it's a good reason to speak at conferences if your job is actually doing that, right? There are some independent contractors that is a way to get job gigs. So you can contact with clients, get more jobs when you are here. In my case, it's a little bit different. I don't want any job from you, even though my company would be more than happy, and please come to me. I learned a lot on meetups in London, where I live now. I learned a lot of conferences, and I realized that sometimes listen to someone else's experience motivates me to change something different. Maybe it's not about following what that person is explaining. It's the change of my mindset that I get after a conference or after a talk. So I was getting a lot of energy and a lot of knowledge from that, and I was thinking, you know, it's a little bit selfish from me that I'm getting that from meetups, from conferences, and maybe if I'm sharing my experience, someone else can get that motivation or that small path, one idea. Not what Anthony was saying, because it was probably rubbish, but now I have an idea after I hear Antonio. So that's motivation. You need to target usually small meetups, small conferences. For people living in UK, conferences in UK are really, really complicated to get inside. First of all, the venues in UK are really, really expensive in London. So, and the prices for a ticket at a conference in London, sometimes it could be salary here for 3 or 4 months. So, of course, they're not going to accept a lot of new people. They need the stars, and I'm not one of those. Probably Dave would be on those conferences because he's amazing. In some countries here in Eastern Europe, they are more than happy to have speakers with not a lot of experience, but coming from a different country, because it's what they are looking for, experience from a different country to see a different point of view. And they are more willing to actually accept people from different countries. And you have less people submitting, so you need to increase your chances. In the conference that there are 1,000 submissions, probably I'm not going to get there ever. Well, maybe one day. Here, I don't know the number of submissions, but if it's 1,000 among here, I could be, oh, but probably it wasn't 1,000. Some conferences, you might need to submit 1 year, but you really want to be there the following year. You only submit this year because the program committee is going to remember your name for the next year. Because if they don't know your name, probably you're not going to be there. Different talks ideas, case studies, tech exploration, and some themes talk. The leadership ones, on my experience, unless your role title has a C, like a CTO, CEO, CIO, things like that, it's really, really complicated unless you are one of the Agile Manifesto creators, that they can do anything about leadership because they are amazing. Depending on what you choose, if it's a case study or tech exploration, target the proper conference. When there are conferences specific about an architecture or about the technology like containers or even blockchain, the business or soft skill talks, they do have also specific conferences, but sometimes there are more and more conferences that are focused for developers that they start adding more soft skills talks, because at the end, if you're a good developer, you can learn any technology easier. But sometimes you need to go beyond technology. So that could be a good idea of a talk. when I'm looking for a talk idea, I not any crazy idea, anything. Sometimes it was Scrum Mastering of Pain. Of course, I didn't do a talk about that. And a lot of things. When I created this idea, it was at DevOps Days Riga. They do in the afternoons. It's an open space, so everybody submit ideas to have a catch-up with others. And one of the ideas was become a conference speaker. So one of them wanted to know this process, wanted to know how to fight the fear of public speaking and things like that. So that was, I noted down. And the following year, I started saying, actually, I noticed that in several conferences, there's always someone asking one of the speakers, probably not me, the good ones, how do you manage to be here? So I created a talk. I'm not an expert. My job is not actually the conferences. I have to fight with previous employers to actually being able to be at conferences. Now managed to have an agreement of 3-4 conferences a year with my current employer, but it's not my job. It's only that I want to share experience, and hopefully someone will tweet one day, after the talk with Antonio, I managed to submit one talk and it's accepted. Well, please be one of those, because I need one like that for my next time of the conference. For the moment, I'm not getting one. When you have all the ideas and you are refining the list, look if there are similar talks. If you are going to be creating a talk about microservices, look, is there any talk that is similar to you? Yes. In Europe here? Yes. Why your talk is going to be different than that one? If you don't have answer for that, maybe do a different one. If no one else is speaking about that, we have 2 cases. It's a really good thing, and you find the new idea that is going to get you a spot of the conferences. Or is that bad idea that that's the reason no one is speaking about? Ask college. Ask someone else, the community, on some meetups, if that idea could be enough to be on the meetup, if they could be happy attending a talk speaking about that. And then pick one. Focus on one at a time. You need to approach the conferences, so good title and description. With the title and the description, as I'm not British, now I always ask several people in my company or some colleagues first to correct all my grammar mistakes that probably I should have asked them to correct on the slides. I think I have some. And then you will ask them, would you go to a conference and pick that talk? And if you're still having some yes, then submit that idea to the conference. Some conferences, they have all the dates about the submission start this day, finish on this one, you will announce on this one. But other conferences, they submit all the time, and if we like it, you are going to be accepted till we complete. So if you submit the first days, you have more chances, because sometimes it's good but not enough, it's good but not enough, and at the end, well, we don't have something else, so it's good enough. If you submit the last day, there are less spots. Ask for feedback to the program committee. Not every conference answer. But when they do, usually they give good feedback about why it's not on the program this year. Sometimes they can tell you, the talk is really good, and probably last year you would be on the program. It's only that this year they could be other more interesting, and you were just the third on the top list that weren't get it. Practice. When you have a talk, practice. Practice yourself out loud. I'm pretty sure that when you are trying to practice any talk or any speech, you're practicing in your mind, right? And when I'm giving a talk to myself in my mind, I can tell you, it's the best talk ever. even better than Dave's this morning. It was the best talk in history. Then you try it out loud, and you record yourself, even if it's only the voice. You will start realizing that it's not the best. You will start realizing where to improve it. If you watch yourself in a video, you will realize all the bad things, and you are going to realize even better than anybody else, because you are the only one who knows exactly how the talk should be. The good thing for you, any day that you are going to be giving a talk, all of you don't know exactly how this talk should be. And of course, I'm going to tell you, it should be like it is right now. Everything that I'm saying, every movement, I was thinking about that. No. But you don't know it. So don't be afraid of, I got blank. If you see a lot of opening keynotes or even experienced speakers, sometimes they stop and they put to make some momentum, right? Not all of them, but some of them already told me that, you know that, when I was doing that, I completely had blank mind. But they don't realize because you just put a face of an interesting guy. Oh, okay, yeah, this. And you continue. Because they don't know that you actually have a blank mind. That's the beauty of it. Don't be worried about forgetting things. Say something else, and it's going to be okay, because they don't know what to expect. Unless you are putting an abstract of 2,000 words with everything that you're going to say, but don't worry, you won't get accepted if you do that. Practice in front of audience. If you do on your company lunch and learn, it's a good way. People will tell you at the end of the talk all the mistakes, where to improve. You will realize as well if you are saying, At the beginning, I was saying that quite a lot. They told me that, and now I'm reducing that. Hopefully, I'm not saying that today. If I'm saying it, just let me know after, not in the middle. Because when you are conscious of that mistake, the first 3-4 talks, you're going to be enforcing not to say it. Then you're not going to even think about it, and you are going to stop saying it. Usually I would say on these 2 minutes at least 4 or 5 times. Yeah, I'll just say it, but because I want it. Ask for feedback. I'm going to ask at the end as well if there is anything that you didn't like. I want to know the things that you didn't like. On one conference, I got feedback. One of the attendants said the speaker was moving a lot and it was complicated to follow. So now I just got a rule that is half meter from here, half meter from there. Usually I'm not moving more than that. But if no one would ever told me, how could I know? Now I am always asking. Ask feedback to the conference organizers. If you get to a conference, I don't know if here there is a feedback form or not. Some conferences they do. Ask for feedback. And I will ask some of you if I remember your faces, which is a little bit complicated because my memory is always. You need to build a brand now. If you want to be in conferences, you need to make yourself not as famous as Dave Snowden, but you need to have some data that is going to back up that actually you know a little bit about the subject, or you have some experience speaking. When I created my Twitter account, it was just a couple of months before I started transmitting talks. It was a colleague from my company. He told me that you need Twitter account. There are a lot of conferences that they announce the call for papers and anything on Twitter. You can do different ways. One is put things that are going to create a lot of controversial thinking. I'm not like that. Or you just retweet nice things, tweet, I just wrote a blog about this, and you can find it here. If you get to the conference, put your Twitter handler on every slide. And I was, why? And he told me, you know, now everybody has cameras. If they want to put a picture of one of your slides, probably not mine because they're a little bit awful, but if you have the Twitter handler, they are going to tweet at the right person and not someone else. And it's a good way for them to remember you, and after the conference to check your Twitter, maybe to start liking things, to talk about that to someone else. It's publicity, it's marketing for free. You put it there, someone make a picture. I was on this boring talk, publicity, but you are there. Share your slides after the talk. So depending on the Wi-Fi, after the talk, I'm going to share the slides. And share videos of your previous talks. However, there is an asterisk there, right? I explained before that some conferences, they always ask for a link to a previous talk. I was unlucky that on my first year giving talks, only one conference recorded my talk. My first ever talk. Where I was moving over there, speaking really fast, doing all the time, but I had to submit something. Of course, I was rejected a lot of times. And I was on one conference with Mark Smalley. I don't know if you know him. It's a really amazing speaker. So if you see him at the conference, go. It's really good. After the talk, he came to me, oh, I enjoyed your talk. It was really yourself, sharing yourself and your experience. It was really, really good. And it was in Riga. Have you ever been to Tallinn before? Yeah, that was my reaction as well. It's why someone asked me if I've ever been to Tallinn, that is a conference in Riga, different country, right? I didn't understand. I added him on LinkedIn, and 2 days after the conference, I was saying something, conferences in Tallinn, bam. And there's one conference there. I checked, it was the following month. There's still a couple of slots, and he was part of the program committee. I said, okay, I submit the same talk. 5 minutes after the submissions, I got a message from him on LinkedIn. Oh, I'm really happy that you submitted. I cannot promise that it's going to be accepted because it's more people on the program committee, but I did share with them that I enjoyed your talk. And by the way, I owe you an apology because when you submitted to that other conference, I was the one saying no because the video that you submitted, it was awful. They said, well, it was the only one that I had. Oh, well, that explains everything, but don't ever submit that video again. Marketing, publicity, network. Social media, follow speakers, follow conferences, contact speakers at conferences on Twitter. Sometimes you might get one of them to be your mentor and to help you. And it's a good, valuable feedback if you submit a title and abstract to a famous speaker and say, no, that's not good. You know that you don't have to spend more time. Where do I submit papers? There is a website called PaperCall. That's the process for normal people like me. I'm pretty sure that Dave is different. Dave only opened email. Could you please come to our conference? Can you explain your rates? I'm not on that. I need to check. So a lot of conferences published there, the call for papers. There is a big group in Germany that also do some conferences in UK, that is JAX. That's the URL for the call for papers. DevOps Days, they have also a URL for submitting papers. CodeMotion, and Twitter. Just look on Twitter for conferences, and you will find. You might even discover a conference called Heapcon in Serbia. And then, be clever. When you submit, if it's the first time ever to a conference, never been to Serbia. So in order to remediate that, I've just submitted a couple of talks to Heapcon. Here we go, here. So I don't know if that helped or not, but at least it shows that you're engaged with the conference in general, with all the conferences space. Imagine you got accepted finally. No one explained to me anything, and they're really, really easy tips. Bring your own clicker. If you use the one that the conference organizers have, there is a chance that you've never used it. And you're going to advance twice or 3 times and go back twice. Have you ever seen a talk of someone that is going too fast and slow? Imagine trying to make the joke about Darth Vader, and you see Darth Vader before the inhaler. No, right? Your clicker. You are used to it. You know exactly the strength that you press and things like that. If you use a Mac, that's a pain for conference organizers. Mac, you need adapters, and not all the time the same adapter is going to work. I'm bringing 2 different adapters. Some days this one is working, some days that one, and some days none of them, and I don't know why. But at least if I'm bringing mine, there's a big chance that it's going to work. Check the room before. Usually I'm always on the talk before mine, even if it's something that maybe it's not what I'm interested, but I can see whether the lights are affecting the previous speaker, whether the sound sometimes is funny or not, whether the people can see me, whether I would be able to see them or not, and things like that. And you can get more or less more familiar, and then less afraid of speaking if you know already the room. If there is problems, technical problems with the previous speaker, you know it might happen. If it happens, well, life is hard sometimes, but you are ready because you know that it might happen. Don't target everybody in the audience. I'm pretty sure that not all of you are like this talk, and it's okay. Target a small group, even if it's only one person. It's really complicated to give a talk and to have absolutely everybody in the room saying, oh, amazing guy, well done. That's not, maybe to someone else, but that's not going to happen, at least at the beginning. When you are really afraid, speaking fast, saying all the time, you are not going to have everybody saying, yay. Not having questions is okay. Depending on where you are giving the talk, the culture is different. In some countries, people don't like to ask questions. In some countries, they prefer to even think a little bit more and maybe come to you later to ask you the question. Even Dave, he only had one question, and he was really, really close of not having any. Having a lot of questions, maybe it's not a good thing either, but better probably. People on mobile and laptops aren't always bored. Right now, they can be Twitter. They can even check in your LinkedIn profile. Or maybe they are bored, but they pay to be here, so they have the right to use their time as they wish, right? So don't be worried about that. Hopefully, if they are bored, one of them will let you know at the end of the talk, and you can change it for next time. Remember to breathe. That's for me. I should put probably that on every slide. And the most important, enjoy and smile. Because if you are here, you did it. You managed to be at a conference, and you're giving a talk. The first time is complicated, but after, it's okay. And now I'm going to try, probably the pronunciation is going to be really awful. Smala. Thank you, Salim. 1 minute. One question, knowing that not having questions is okay. I'm making life easy.
Hi. I'm going to spoil it for your awesome talk. Thank you.
Got one, yes.
And I actually have more questions, but I'm just going to give you one. Do you consider yourself in your private life an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert. And actually, giving talks, it helps me for the rest of the conference to talk to people, especially in countries that I don't speak the language. Because hopefully, one of you, or maybe you later, is going to start asking me questions. So it's going to make my life easier, because most of the time I know what is the subject about, so I can answer. But most of the time, if I don't have any question, I'm going to be on the corner, eating. There is a lot of food, so it's a problem. And not talking to anybody. When it's in England or France or Spain, I can sometimes say something. Here, I could probably say in Slovak, because my wife is Slovak, ja hovorím len trochu po slovensky. And hey, and that's all. So you would understand me, but if you answer to me,
Any more questions? Or should we go to the 10-minute break, then we're going to start with another talk? Or yeah, that's it. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Outer Space if you haven't been here. Let's give warm welcome to George. He came all the way from Portland, Oregon, so let's give applause for him. We want to thank you for coming all the way from Portland, from USA. And if you're into JavaScript and if you're into art, I think you'll be very pleased with this talk, and I won't talk any much. I'll give the floor back to George. Thank you.
Hvala puno, dobrodošli, and ne govorim srpski. Yeah, thank you, everybody, for coming. The name of this talk is JavaScript for Artists, and we're going to look at, today we're going to look at how JavaScript is I think, a very unique platform for creating artistic and creative works. And we're going to talk about that, what that means, and why I think that's important, not just for beginning or intermediate developers, but developers with all skill levels. I think that exploring and creating with our code is something that is beneficial to us at any stage in our career and something we could all stand to do more of. And before I continue, am I audible? Am I reasonably audible out there? Okay, it sounds a little different up here, and I just wanted to make sure before I keep talking. Before I dive into the subject too closely, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit. I find when I go to conferences and I listen to people talk, I tend to remember things a little bit better if I get to know the person a little bit, if it's personalized to some extent. That might just be me, I don't know. But if I can remember one or two things about them, I am much more likely later to remember the talk or some subjects and go back to that and actually reference it. So on this slide, I always like to put a few fun random facts about me to introduce myself. So my name is George. I'm an independent web developer. I've done that for about 13 years out of Portland, Oregon. I think in JavaScript years, that's like 75 years, depending on how you look at it, so I can retire soon. That's great. I'm also a Google developer expert. That's a somewhat new thing. That's been a fun change in my career. I've gravitated towards doing more mentorship type things lately, mentoring people one-on-one, running workshops, boot camps, things of that nature. If you're interested in that, please feel free to talk to me later. Now, one of the more funny facts, one of my most known open source projects is a project called Konami.js. I'm curious, has anyone heard of it? Every once in a while I get a few hands. I see one hand. It might be a polite hand, I'm not sure. We'll see. I made this over 10 years ago, and it's a silly Easter egg script that enables the Konami code on your website. And when you enter the Konami code, something happens. That doesn't sound very novel. That's kind of a programming 101 project. The only novel thing that maybe my thing did is it worked on smartphones with gestures at the time. And really, more than anything, the timing was right. So companies like Marvel and Tesla and Newsweek, and like everyone who was working on sites back then used my project, and I got really excited. And I'm happy that today my most seemingly meaningful contribution to open source is still a very frivolous, kind of fun project. That seems to be my brand, and I'm okay with that. Oh yeah, related to that, I mentioned Marvel. I accidentally broke Marvel.com for about a minute when someone pointed out to me they were using my project. I got very excited, and I pushed a really quick git push to fix something, and I found out they were linking directly to the file on GitHub, like the raw source. And I don't know how it broke exactly, but I went to their site, and it was a mess. So that was kind of funny. I don't think anyone ever noticed. And lastly, I once ran a marathon in North Korea, and I accidentally cheated. People tend to remember that one, so maybe you'll remember that and something else from this talk. And here's some proof. I turn around like the slides are here. They're not. If you ever want to find North Korean flags, that's a good place to go. And there's more proof. Here's my certificate of accomplishment, I guess. But more importantly and relevant to this talk, I like to make things. I really like to make fun, interesting, creative things, at least in my opinion. I find that process, it keeps me interested in learning new things. In this industry, there's new frameworks and technologies like every 6 months or less, and it's really hard to keep up on it. But I find that having creative art projects of my own to work on and dabble with, it keeps me fresh and interested, and it keeps me from burning out for the most part. Yeah, and I also enjoy not just using, exploring new tools in that way, but I like pushing them maybe past the boundaries of how they're intended to be used sometimes. Sometimes at the fringe, you can find sometimes you make interesting discoveries that end up being useful for other applications. So let's get to the topic. So the talk is called JavaScript for Artists. So you might be asking yourself some questions, things like, what do we mean by art exactly? What is art? Which is a huge question, and I'm not going to answer really. And maybe why JavaScript? За что JavaScript? За что JavaScript? So those are all good questions. First of all, what I mean when I'm talking about art, a lot of you probably have your own idea of what art is when you came to this talk. I'm also willing to bet a number of you came because you have no idea what this talk is going to be about. Some of you might have thought of something maybe like this, like very Western painting, something you might see at a museum. Or maybe you thought of something a little more abstract, kind of like this. Others here, your brain might have gone straight to music, something totally non-visual. Or others might have thought of something totally kinetic in dance, which is still art, some kind of expression. Or maybe because this is sort of a tech conference, and I feel like this is a more common thing in this sort of atmosphere, maybe you thought of something a little more experiential, something that kind of combines an installation of sorts. Or maybe something like this. This photo kind of makes me laugh. I like to sit on it for a moment. It's I think he's painting with VR goggles on. So all of those things are somewhat correct and apply to what we're talking about today. As far as my talk and what I mean by art, as far as a definition for today and for this talk, I'm going to say anything created for a joyful exploration of a discipline, an expression of something captured only through the work itself, or my favorite way to define this, oh wait, no, I have 4, I'm sorry. Embracing one's curiosity in a pursuit to find an answer to a question, or more succinctly, something that's not precisely useful but not exactly pointless. So that is my working definition for what we're talking about with art today. And here I have just some random things I made sort of in that vein, some visualizations and things like that. That one's kind of hard to see, I realize. In that vein, I'd like to share with you for a moment a couple things I've made that sort of fit this mold. They're simple things, but these are kind of the things I do to get going in the morning sometimes. Some people have crosswords to get their brain started. I like to sit down and make little visualizations and just little games and things that I find interesting. Sometimes they are things like, oops. Oh, there we go, there's my mouse. Things like that, which I realize are hard to see on the screen, perhaps. There we go. One of the things I really enjoy making are not just works and arts that exist purely in the code itself, but I like to make tools that are, sometimes sort of abstract drawing tools that allow me to sketch and record and create things kind of like this. Oh, let's see. Bear with me, my internet's been in and out, so some of these demos may not quite work, I'm realizing. Here we go. So now I can demonstrate a little more clearly what's going on here. There we go. That one eventually gets going here. And let's do one more here. Oh, this one was an idea I had somewhat recently to, who knows what a camera lucida is? Who's familiar with the camera obscura? That's more commonly known, I think. It's very similar, but the gist of the idea is it's a drawing aid that an artist can use to look at a subject, and they will see a reflection in the mirror is angled in a particular way, so that basically it'll look as though they'd be able to trace it in real life. And actually, if I demonstrate the effect here, let's see. So I will look at this and I'll pause the image. And then I just made a tool that let me trace, basically, what I saw a little more poorly at this moment. And then I have some tools down here to vary the opacity and, oops, I have to go the other way. See how my drawing's coming along, kind of compare it like this. Anyway. These are some of the things I'm talking about, some of the simpler things. So I have a loose definition of what I mean by art at this point. So back to the bigger question. So why JavaScript? It basically boils down to three reasons. It's everywhere. It's on the server. It's on the browser. It's on hardware. It's it's anywhere computing is happening. You can pretty much be guaranteed to find JavaScript. For better or worse, there's a low barrier to entry. TypeScript people probably think for worse, I would imagine. But for that reason, it's actually a really great tool for this kind of exploration because anybody at any particular skill level can start dabbling. You can start writing JavaScript tomorrow really poorly, but you're still learning some of the basic tenets of programming and can start exploring, creative things and creating works. And it's also where the people are. There are so many conferences and meetups and events surrounding JavaScript. That may not always be the case, but I would say today is a very good time to be a JavaScript developer of some kind, and probably for the next 5 years at least, I would guess. JavaScript is also kind of uniquely suited for creating fun, interactive, experiential, and creative things. Part of it's like the ubiquity that we mentioned before. A big part of it is the browser. The browser is an interface that I think we kind of take for granted when it comes to the APIs that it affords us and how easy it makes it to do certain things that in other programming languages or other contexts might require a lot more work. We have things like the media capture API, that last example I showed you where I was tracing my face. With like 3 or 4 lines of code, I can the browser can make use of the camera that's on my computer, and now we can actually look at the person who's looking at whatever it is you made and interact with things that way. We have a microphone, we have the Canvas API, we have geolocation if you want to have your artwork be location affected. The browser is a very unique tool that no other language really has access to in that regard. And like I said before, there's so many conferences and things. There's a lot of industry and community support. Especially in the realm of like machine learning and things like that, there's a lot of exciting new services and APIs coming out. You can pretty much guarantee that if there's a new API for a service or a startup or something like that that's for developers, it's going to offer some kind of JavaScript SDK. There's going to be a way to talk to it in JavaScript. So that's another reason I think it's a very good reason to be doing this kind of thing in JavaScript. So why is this important? So as children, we learn through play, and like I said at the top of this, I think that we tend to lose that as we get further into our careers, partly because it's overwhelming. But I think there's something to that. There has to be a way we can sort of maintain that throughout our career. There's a lot of studies that have also shown recently that people who dabble in lots of different disciplines tend to do better at their main discipline, their main focus. One of the studies was actually with professional athletes, and they found that athletes who grew up playing a wide variety of sports tend to do a lot better than the ones that would specialize in a particular sport, even though that's not necessarily what you would think. I think in that same vein, creative exploration, creating art and things like that with JavaScript is a way to diversify the kind of stuff we do. So we're not just constantly, going through sorting algorithms and just ramming that through our brain until we, internalize them. Let's see here. Lastly, I think about this a lot, given how quickly things change. We cannot be experts at everything. We are guaranteed to be amateurs at something, and I think we should celebrate that we're amateurs sometimes and just kind of own it. And I think that making fun, creative things is a good way to do that. In that same vein, at the top of this talk, I showed you some very simple, creative things that I made that I found fun. It doesn't necessarily, I think your approach to programming doesn't necessarily have to be the final output. I think the way you approach a very simple problem or a very simple project can also be creative in itself. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I have another project that I'm working on called 101 Ways to Say Hello World. And basically, it's all in JavaScript. I'm trying to literally come up with 101 different ways to say hello world. That is the one I would probably choose on Stack Overflow if someone asked me. Seems correct enough. And then I thought, well, how can I make this harder on myself? What's a more interesting way I can do it? And I thought, well, I could put each letter in an array, and then I could join all the letters in the array, and okay, then we get a hello out world output. And then I thought, maybe I could just visually arrange the code on my page and make it kind of fun. I don't know. Sometimes I pull up a project and the documentation looks kind of beautiful in its own way. And then I thought, well, maybe I could do something even weirder. I could, figure out I think the Unicode number, and then this one I reversed it. Yeah, so I reversed it. We could do more things with arrays. Or maybe I could find out what the char code is for each letter and have an array full of numbers, go through it that way. And it kind of just went so on and so forth, finding more and more weird ways to tackle what, if you just run the program, all of these just say hello world. They're not very exciting, but I had a lot of fun trying to come up with more and more convoluted ways to do that. Oh yeah, this one actually extracts the letters required for hello world from the error messages that the browser is spitting out. That was kind of a fun challenge. It turns out Node and the JavaScript in the browser have slightly different error messages for certain things, so you have to account for it in a different way. And then my recursive approach, that was kind of fun. And then that one is probably that's right. I have a function, a recursive alphabet function, so I have to call it as many times as I have to go through the alphabet to find the letter. That's right. I apologize for squinting. I really can't read this code at all from where I'm standing. Normally it's a little bigger. Anyway, you get the idea. I think that when I talk about creativity and art, I feel like this qualifies, just finding fun, clever ways to amuse yourself. And another thing I mentioned is sometimes through this exploration, sometimes the best things are discovered. Actually, a lot of like inventions in early computing were sort of through this joyful exploration by people in the field at the time. I knew a lot of it was a lot longer ago than you probably think. Like the first computer music was in 1951. The first synthesized speech was in 1961. The first image was in 1956. We had animations in 67, 3D animations, and like an experiential interactive exhibit in 71. And then some generative poetry in 1952. And I'm going to just show you these really quickly. So Alan, the Mark II was designed by Alan Turing, and Christopher Strachey, a like famous early computing person, was working on it one night late doing something or another, and there was a mechanism on the computer that this disk would spin and a tone would sound to let them know that certain processes were done. And he just happened to notice that that tone was at a particular pitch, and he could write a program that changed the speed at which that component would spin and thus change the pitch. And so he stayed up all night and he wrote a program that let him write music on the Mark II, which it was not intended to do in the slightest. And so here is a recreation of the first song that he wrote on anyway, you get the idea. Synthesized speech, it's interesting to me how long ago like that was a thing. I remember when in Chrome there's an API where you can have text to speech, and it's kind of fun to play with. I haven't found a wildly practical use for it, but it is kind of fun. But back in 1961, they were doing this.
In the next selection, the computer sings a familiar ditty.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too.
Imagery. So this is really interesting and kind of funny in a roundabout way. So I was doing research trying to find out what was the first instance of like an image being used on a computer, and I came across this. This was a $238 million piece of military equipment in the US, which is like over $2.2 billion today, which is insane. And nobody took credit for this, but somebody put a pinup lady on. It's a radar thing, so it would detect whether or not there are enemy planes in the territory. So somebody did this supposedly as part of the startup diagnostic test. You would turn on the machine and you would see this for a while, and then eventually, when everything was fine, it would go back to doing what it's supposed to do. It's slightly unfortunate that it's like the very first image I could find, and kind of. I like to say maybe a good sign that we need more women in tech, because I feel like that probably would not happen today. But I also like that somebody saw, it's kind of funny to me, someone saw this $200 million machine, and that was the first thing they thought to do with it. They're like, oh. Animations go back quite a bit further. This is actually at the Museum of Modern Art now. A few of these items are. And here's the one I mentioned up top. This is a 3D animation called Mythical Creature. And what's cool about this one is you can actually interact with it in person. There are controls that allow you to change the color, the direction that the fish, or whatever that is, I suppose, is actually swimming. It's a really cool experiential interactive sort of a thing. And then last but not least, I think this was Christopher Strachey again. He wrote a generative poem thing, which was it was a glorified Mad Libs. Who's familiar with what Mad Libs are? I realized before okay. Basically, it would just come up with a sentence structure, and it would randomly pop in verbs and nouns in certain contexts, depending on how things were. Anyway, he would use this to write love letters to his wife while he was working on his computer. Okay, so I gave a sort of long-winded example of why I think this is important, how creativity and art sort of push the industry forward, I think. So let's talk a little specifically about what is available to us as JavaScript developers to make creative, fun things. Now this is a woefully incomplete list, but I sort of broke it down into three very broad categories. We have the browser and all of the capabilities and the APIs and things that it brings. We have JavaScript on hardware, which is a really fun world to explore if you're not familiar with it. And then even though this kind of blurs all the lines in some ways, I sort of put AI and machine learning stuff into its own category, just because it's so unique, and there are some really fun ways we can start to dabble with machine learning stuff and create cool art with that. Okay. So the browser, we have a few, the browser is sort of like our eyes, our mouth, and our ears, not really our nose, to interacting with people. We have the DOM, obviously, it allows us to create virtual interfaces and things that the people looking at our art can interface with. We have Canvas and WebGL if you want to make more visually sophisticated things. If you want to start playing with audio, we have the whole world of web audio, and right now there's some really interesting inventions going on with WebAssembly and web audio to make that even more efficient. Media capture, like I said at the top, the things that we make, not only can we look at them, but they can look back at us and they can respond. Or they can listen with the microphone and interact in that sort of a way. And then we can also communicate with other things we've made using technologies like WebRTC or WebSockets. So now we have pieces of art that are communicating with other pieces of art anywhere in the world and the users by extension through them. The browser, I really like the browser. I think it just has a lot of cool things that it lets us do that we take for granted sometimes. If you want to work with the DOM, obviously, you can work directly with the API in JavaScript. There are some things that exist to make it easier. These days, all the browsers are pretty nice. I started so long ago, I have to list jQuery, because I remember when jQuery came out and like how it made my life so much easier. But these days, 90% of the time, and particularly for like art projects, you probably wouldn't need to do that. If you want to play with Canvas and WebGL, again, you can always, for most of these, obviously access the API directly in the browser. Who's heard of P5 here, P5.js? If you take away nothing else from this talk, I would say go home and play with P5. Who's heard of processing? It's a Python-based sort of visualization thing. Okay, it's kind of like processing, but for the browser. It's amazing. If you want to if you just want to make a circle that bounces around the screen and have it make sounds when it hits the corners, you can whip that out really quickly in P5.js. Web audio, obviously. Tone.js is a really great library for creating music and tones and things like that. And again, we have the media capture API for looking at and listening to our users. Oh, and WebRTC and sockets. So let me do a quick overview of JavaScript on hardware and what some of those options look like. Oops. So we have, who's heard of the Esperino, out of curiosity? They're based out of, I think they were invented in the UK. So the Esperino is amazing. It actually has a JavaScript interpreter on board. It's kind of like an Arduino, but you write JavaScript and it interprets it and executes it directly on the device. It's maybe not the most efficient thing to do, but it's a lot of fun to be able to write like little programs with the lights blink and things like that. This thing that I'm holding up here is actually an Esperino. I've reprogrammed it to do some strange things. My computer actually thinks this is a musical instrument, and I can play notes by clicking things, which I might demonstrate a little later here. And we have some other things. Johnny 5 in particular is a really good library for interfacing with all kinds of hardware, like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and things like that. So if you want to start experimenting with hardware and JavaScript in some capacity, I would suggest starting with those things. And then the one at the very end, I include WebMIDI, which is a browser API, and it allows you to communicate with musical instruments that support MIDI, like this thing that I made up here. It's a lot of fun, and if the idea of wiring up circuits and playing with hardware directly is sort of intimidating, then I would suggest maybe start with WebMIDI and make something that just talks to a musical instrument, because a lot of the basic principles, as far as programming goes, are in there. Like if you want to just create something where I push a button over here in the real world and something happens on the screen, WebMIDI is a perfect technology for that. It's very simple. Let's see. Oh, wait. Did I have that slide up the whole time I was talking? I'm sorry. That was the one I thought was up on the screen when I was saying that. I'll let it sit there for a moment here. So the last thing I'm going to talk about real quickly is so AI and machine learning. and how we can play with that. So this one in particular I find interesting because in my day-to-day work as a freelance developer, to be honest, I don't run into opportunities to use these things very often. That's kind of my impression with a lot of people. It's a really interesting technology. We're all sort of wrapping our brains around it. If you work at a very large company, you might have a practical use case for some of these things, but most of us are kind of looking at it, trying to figure out how to apply it and, you know, appreciating it, but sort of still figuring it out. Creating art is a really good way to play with some of these machine learning libraries and things. Up at the top here, ML5.js and Magenta.js in particular are two libraries that are actually based on TensorFlow, but they have specific functions for creating visualizations and music and things that you might want to do if you're creating art. So I really highly recommend checking those out. Those are a lot of fun. Those also all run on the client side, so it will kind of depend on how fast your computer is, whether or not that's an enjoyable experience. If you're making something for a lot of people, you might want to reconsider that, because you know, their laptop might double as a heater, depending on how intense the thing is, and not all phones necessarily can do a lot of these things very effectively. So for those situations, you might want to look at some of the web services that allow us to do the same thing. It's kind of the usual companies you would expect. We have Microsoft, Google, and Amazon offering a lot of machine learning / AI services. The trade-off, obviously, is they're not free, and it requires a connection, and you're sort of giving your data to those companies. But the payoff is they're pretty quick, and they're about the same speed for everyone. And also, they can do a lot more. I'm going to demonstrate some facial recognition stuff here in a little bit and show you some of the differences. And then again, oh yeah, the third option with machine learning that not a lot of people know about, there's an experimental browser API called the Shape Detection API. Has anyone heard of that one? I'm curious. It's pretty cool. So you have to go to the Chrome flags, and it's under the experimental features, and you have to enable it. But basically, it's a browser-based API that will allow you to recognize faces in image, extract text from images, and barcodes too, I think, somewhat randomly. It works entirely offline on the client side. It's built into Chromium, and any Chromium-based project will inherit this feature. So if you are using Electron, you could make, you could add facial recognition to your Electron app. Or if you're using Microsoft Edge, even supports it. So it's kind of cool. It's a little, it is experimental, so there's some things that are broken, but it's very exciting. So yeah, those are the, so what I just touched on are actually kind of the three main approaches to facial recognition. If that's something you want to add to your project, I think it's a good like first step in learning this area. And so there is a library called faceapi.js that is it runs entirely on the client side. If you want to experiment with that, you can train your own models and have it set up to recognize your face, or you can download some of the pre-existing models that come with it to generally recognize faces, but also recognize things like expression, emotion, the age of the person looking at, or in the image that you're trying to assess. That's a really fun sort of component to throw into a piece. And the code, I apologize, I would sort of walk you through it, but it's so small up here, I'm having a hard time seeing it, and I'm not sure if it's legible to you there either, so I apologize for that. I can, if you're interested, I'd be happy to talk more about it with you later. So similarly, we can, if we don't want to use something like faceapi.js and do it entirely on the client side, we can send it to a service like Azure. That's pretty straightforward. We're basically uploading the image to Azure, waiting for a response, and then we get a JSON object with all the information about how many faces are in the image, how those people are feeling. We also get more information like whether or not they're wearing a hat or glasses or have a mustache and things like that. And then lastly, that experimental shape detection API looks like this. It's basically as simple as enabling like geolocation or the media capture API. It's actually easier than the media capture API, to be honest. That one has a lot of parameters you have to think about sometimes. This one you can do in just a few lines. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I look forward to that one becoming more mainstream and popular. So I want to show you a couple demos based on a couple of these things I've talked about. I want to show you the facial recognition demos and some of that stuff that I was talking about here. So bear with me one moment. Here we go, let's just do this. Okay. Is this the one? Let's see. Okay, I will jump straight to this demo that let's see here. So one of the things I made, so I was playing with the Face API, faceapi.js library, and all of the, loading all of the facial recognition models on the client side, experimenting with that. Specifically, I was playing with the one that recognizes expressions and emotions. And I thought it would be fun to make something that could respond to how I'm feeling. So I made something that basically tries to sing me a song if it thinks I'm sad and cheers me up. And let me just demo it here. Okay, so it's looking at me right now. If I smile, it thinks I'm happy. If I look sad, should start playing a song, unless my audio is down. Well, now I really am going to be sad if it doesn't play my song. Keeping a straight face for this part is always very hard. Oh. Well, let me see if it responds to other faces too. I can get angry. Maybe. Maybe I can't. I don't know. There we go. And if I look surprised, anyway, it's kind of a fun one. The song abruptly stops when I'm angry, so I'm not exactly sure why that didn't work. I apologize for that. Maybe this one works. No, I don't think that's it. Let's see. Well, I tell you what, bear with me 1 second here. This one should work. Okay. There we go. Thank you. Wait, let me try this. I don't want to hear this song. Let me make sure this one works here. Okay, it has to load the models. Takes a second. Oh, come on. Okay, well. So let me show you a... Okay, here we go. So the demo that I showed you, even though it didn't do the part that I really wanted, uses the Face API.js library to do all the facial recognition on the client side. That'll work offline. This one uses Azure Cognitive Services to do pretty much the same thing, but I wanted to show you all of the extra data that I get. So with Face API.js, I basically get 4, maybe 5 expressions that it can identify somewhat inconsistently. This one gives me a whole bunch of other data to play with, which is kind of fun. So let me do this and see if my face gets in there, and then I will click on this button. And okay, there we go. So it's sent that off to Microsoft, and it sent it back to me that quick. So now it's identifying where my face starts. In the image over here, you can sort of see, I don't know if it shows up very well over there, but there's a red rectangle around my face. We scroll further down. You know, the data is a lot more granular. We get a lot more information if we use one of the services with this approach. And then we get, so I have 3% of a smile, evidently, or rather there's a 3% confidence that I have a smile, which means it does not think I have a smile. It is somewhat accurate with my age. You know, I can find whether I have a mustache or a beard or sideburn. All this data is in there, and it's kind of fun because then you can start playing with that and make some really interesting things that respond to this kind of data. And then I think at the very bottom here we get, let's see. Oh, eye makeup and lip makeup. That's right, that's the other one. The last time I did this demo, I thought I was wearing lip makeup. I'm not sure, it must have been the lighting. And let me, just to compare, I also did the same demo using Google Cloud Vision. That's another service you can use. And it's a very similar process. But the object you get back is very different. So let's do this, and I will try to smile. Or maybe I'll just make a funny face. There we go. Okay, so same sort of thing. We get coordinates that identify the face in the photo. It's also very fast, you notice. That was pretty fast. We know where my left eye is, my right eye, left of my left eyebrow. Areas like that, and then we scroll down, and then we get basically just different kinds of data when we use these other services. Likelihood of sorrow, likelihood of anger, very unlikely. It's not very unlikely, I'm surprised, but it's... Okay. Okay, let's see. Well, I'm going to show you one more demo, even though I'm having some demo difficulties today. So let me show you one more that I'm pretty positive will work, and we'll end on that note, I think. This is actually the first sort of art project I made using JavaScript many years ago for a totally, just sort of for a whim. There we go. And so what this does, now I'm nervous that nothing's going to work. So I'm a little bit of a musician. I play in a duo with a jazz guy. And we were playing at a winery kind of a situation, and we wanted some kind of visualization behind us while we played. We just decided that would be fun. And I like to make all my projects bigger than they need to be. And so I built this web MIDI-based web page where I could hit a button on the floor and have videos and random poetry like change behind us. It was pretty pretentious and kind of fun. And so I played with it a little bit more, and this is the thing I made. And it's creating these poems based on famous books and extracting videos from archive.org in the public domain. And it's very simple in principle, but it was a lot of fun to make and kind of touches on some of the stuff I'm talking about. So I've wired it up to recognize my MIDI instrument I'm holding here, and I'm going to hope that this works. So if I give it one click, let's see. And if it doesn't, I have a way to cheat. So. Oh, we got music going. Oh, okay. So every time I click this, it's going to give me a new poem. It's totally random. It's kind of funny because every once in a while you get something that almost seems like it should make sense. I can change the video with 2 clicks. And if I want to change the song, try to get 3 clicks. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, that one worked okay. So let me wrap up here in the last couple minutes. So I showed you a couple demos that went sort of smoothly. There is also a whole world of machine learning stuff with like style transfers and neural net style transfers. It's interesting. It's easy to use and, to be honest, like tricky to completely wrap my brain around. Basically, so what we're looking at here are the same photo of myself that I took many years ago. And I took artwork that I made. Some of it was like generative JavaScript stuff, and a couple of it was like real artwork I made in real life. And I used ML5.js, I believe it was, to basically create a model of the style of the painting or the work, and then apply it to that photo of myself. And I have dozens more, but these are just 3 I picked kind of at random to show you what that looks like. Now the effect is kind of like a cheesy Photoshop filter sometimes, but sometimes it's cooler than that. And so that's sort of the next area that I'm playing with. And for me, it's a really fun opportunity to explore like these machine learning libraries that I otherwise don't have much of a practical use for personally. And I think that's the image I used to ascertain the style of and applied to, I think the one on your left. Yeah. And here's another funny headshot I took a long time ago. It makes me laugh a little bit. Last conference I was at, they didn't think I was actually this person. It was kind of funny. And I took that photo. I did the same thing with some work. And I really like the way that some of these turned out. They actually turned out very cool. And last but not least, this is another project I did. I signed up for this service in the US where I get photographs of my mail every single day. And mostly it's photographs of junk mail, so it's like getting junk mail twice. But I thought, well, maybe I'll find some use for this. It's like, collecting junk mail to cut them out and make like a collage or something. I was collecting digital junk mail to figure out a use for it. And so when I was playing with this neural style transfer stuff, I realized, oh, maybe I could do something there. And what I made was the strange collage of like my junk mail and some other things. Anyway, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I would love to talk to you about this stuff. And I have, I have a little website set up called JavaScript for Artists. I have tons and tons of links to libraries and projects and things if you want to see some of these examples and better examples that other people have done out there. So, hvala puno.
Thank you, George. It was a great talk. Does anybody have questions for George?
You can go find me in the hallway, too, if you want. That's fine.
Hey, George.
Okay.
First,
oh, sorry.
congrats.
I didn't see you. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. First of all, thank you for all the great examples. And I'm sorry that not all your demos worked.
Me too. Sorry.
I'm really curious if you have a GitHub repo or something that we can, where we can see your code and enjoy your demos, because I think they're really cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I do have one. The short answer is I have one up, and I'm working on the others. I actually have the one that I was trying to show that didn't work, where you make a sad face and it plays a song. That one is up and available, and I can send you the link. And the other visualizations I showed you earlier, I'm working on it, and they should be up soon.
So I have 2 questions.
Okay.
First one, what's the longest you ever worked on one of your art projects? And do you have any ongoing that just never end? And the second one related to that is, when do you decide that you're done? Like, at what point are you satisfied, if you are ever satisfied?
So to answer your first question, I have definitely burned like entire work day. I burned like a whole 8-hour weekend day when I should have been doing other things, working on this like it was my job. And I have no regrets about that. One project that I've been working on, I've had this idea for a year, and I think there's something there, and I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I want to make, I have a title for this project, and I'm still figuring out the details. I'm working backwards, so I'm calling it The Story of You. And what I want is, I want to get up here, and I want to just start talking about myself and my life, and then using the speech-to-text API to collect the text in real time, kind of like a caption. But then I want to take that text and I want to use it to pull in images from, I'm not even sure where yet, or use that to do some sort of other cool generative thing as I'm speaking. I've played with it a little bit. I think there's a good idea in there somewhere. I haven't quite nailed it, and the other challenge is it's pretty bandwidth heavy doing that, and doing it at home makes the fan kick on, and I'd be a little terrified to actually do it in front of a crowd on conference Wi-Fi. But that's the one that excites me the most. I feel like there was an idea in there that really excites me. And then your second question was, I don't think I ever feel like I'm done when I'm working on it, but sometimes I put it away for a long time because I think I'm dissatisfied with it and I'm done. But then I come back to it like 6 months later and suddenly it looks more finished than I thought it did. So, you know, I feel like that's part of the process for me.
Any more questions? Or, yeah, if there's no more questions, thank you, George. You can go and have lunch, but I want to remind you that other stuff starts at 2:15, but the lunch finishes at 2:45. So if you want to come here or wherever, we start at 2:15, so don't be late. And thank you.
Thank you.